Hello, I'm Jeremy, and welcome to another episode of RevUs, where mistreated movies get a second chance. Today, I'll be talking about one of the cheesiest things to ever exist, 1987's Masters of the Universe. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is one of the most charmingly campy animated series I've ever seen. There's just such a unique charm to He-Man that not only makes it unique, but has endeared it to many people, to the point where it's still referenced today and has received many spin-offs and reboots. Some not as successful as others. But easily my favorite is the subject of today's video, the 1987 Canon Films produced piece of cheesy awesomeness, simply titled Masters of the Universe. He-Man, played by Dolph Lundgren, Man-at-Arms, played by John Cypher, and Teela, played by Chelsea Field, are fighting against the evil forces of Skeletor, played by Frank Langella. They come across Gwildor, a locksmith played by Billy Barty, who has invented the Cosmic Key, a device that uses musical notes to transport anybody to anywhere. Gwildor reveals that Skeletor used the Cosmic Key to breach Castle Grayskull, and the gang attempts to use the Cosmic Key to get the drop on Skeletor and his crew. But after being overwhelmed by Skeletor's army, He-Man, Man-at-Arms, Teela, and Gwildor use the Cosmic Key to transport to our world. Yes, it's one of those movies. After the He-Man gang arrives on Earth, the Cosmic Key gets misplaced and lands in the hands of two teenagers, Julie Winston, played by Courtney Cox, and her boyfriend Kevin Corrigan, played by Robert Duncan McNeil. Julie and Kevin soon meet up with the He-Man gang and join forces to take down Skeletor and his crew, while navigating our crazy human world and driving in a pink Cadillac. Yes, they actually drive around in a pink Cadillac. If you like schlocky and cheesy 80s movies, then Masters of the Universe is the film for you, because this thing is a perfect representation of everything good and enjoyably bad about 80s films. Let's start with the effects. While they're nowhere near as awful as the ones in Superman 4, they still have the enjoyable cheesiness that Canon Films is known for. They're very flashy and campy, fitting with the film's aesthetic and not being so bad that it takes you out of the film like Superman 4. The characters are also pretty good. Let's start with He-Man. Aside from the lack of acknowledgement of Prince Adam, He-Man in this movie is pretty much the same as he is in the show. He's brave, loyal, kind, and determined. But the main thing that makes this movie's He-Man a great character is Dolph Lundgren's performance. Lundgren gives the same campy cheesiness he gave when playing Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, which really elevates the character of He-Man. It's a very entertaining performance that does a great job engaging He-Man to the audience. Next are Man-at-Arms and Teela. Like He-Man, these two aren't really distinct characters, but unlike Lundgren, John Cypher and Chelsea Field aren't distinct enough to make their characters stand out. They're not bad by any means, but not enough to elevate their characters. They're just fine. Rounding out the He-Man gang, we have Gwildor. Gwildor is the only member of the He-Man 4 that's interesting enough to fully talk about. For those who are fans of the show, Gwildor is basically a replacement for Orko, as Orko's design was too complicated to simulate in a live-action setting. And while I am kind of disappointed, as Orko was one of my favorite characters from the original series, Gwildor's a suitable replacement. Billy Barty does a great job in the role of Gwildor, balancing the comedic elements of his character without being Jar Jar Binks levels of annoying. And I like how he contrasts off the other characters, as his more cartoonish energy bounces off of the semi-realistic characters on screen. But the character of Gwildor is more than just the comic relief, as he's actually pretty intelligent, and his knowledge of the Cosmic Key does prove useful to the quest. Overall, while it is disappointing that Orko isn't in this movie, Gwildor is a suitable replacement that's not only very funny, but is useful to the plot and fantastically played by Billy Barty. A great character all around. Moving on to Julie and Kevin. These two are alright. Kevin, while not especially memorable, is still likable, and Robert Duncan McNeil does a fine job. And as for Julie, she's very interesting. Not only is Courtney Cox great in the role, but she has a very interesting story. See, Julie's parents died in a plane crash, and despite the film's cheesy nature, it handles this subplot very well. Not amazingly, but it is treated very seriously and executed well up until the very end. But Julie is also more than her tragedy. She's a very interesting character with a lot of depth. Julie is a very personality-driven character, and you can really feel the emotions that she has throughout the film. And while the ending does have some pretty bad implications, it's hard not to feel satisfied when Julie stops her parents from getting on the plane. A solid character all around. Finally, we have Skeletor. To say this character is fantastic is an understatement. Frank Langella nails Skeletor. He manages to be enjoyably hammy and campy, yet still serious enough to be a credible threat. Frank Langella himself even said that Skeletor was one of his favorite roles, and I definitely agree with the man. It's just such a great performance. And unlike He-Man, Skeletor is a lot more than Langella's awesome performance. He's like if you combined the ruthlessness of Darth Vader with the cunning and intellect of a James Bond villain. While his motives aren't that different from most villains of his type, taking over the world, ruling everything, etc., the way Skeletor expresses that goal is very interesting. He's very passionate and determined, and that determination adds to his menace, making him an even more impactful villain. Also, the rivalry he has with He-Man is very effective. You can really feel the animosity the two have for each other, and that animosity really adds to the film's engagement, culminating in a decent final battle. Frank Langella's Skeletor is a really cool character. Not only is Langella fantastic in the role, but the character has a lot of personality, menace, enjoyability, and coolness. Just an all-around fantastic character. Moving on to the fish out of water stuff. As I said earlier, Masters of the Universe is a fish out of water movie, meaning that the film revolves around otherworldly people and or creatures interacting with our own world. There are two ways of doing this premise. You can either go full comedy and have a ton of jokes with the characters interacting with unfamiliar human stuff, like in Enchanted, or the film can take itself seriously and have very few, if any, fish out of water jokes, focusing more on the story, like in Warlock. Masters of the Universe does a little bit of both. It definitely takes itself more seriously than something like Enchanted or Just Visiting, but it isn't above doing some silly stuff, like having the He-Man crew steal and eat some chicken. I like this approach, as not only does it fit with the film's tone, but it sets Masters of the Universe apart from other fish-out-of-water movies. It's an interesting execution that's the right amount of silly and serious. Neat stuff. Finally, let's talk about Masters of the Universe's relationship with its original animated series. In terms of how it relates to the original series, Masters of the Universe is a pretty loose adaptation. I already mentioned how Prince Adam isn't mentioned once and Orko isn't present due to his complex design, but the royal family, She-Ra and Battle-Cat, are pretty much absent. The villains have character traits that don't line up with their Filmation's counterparts, like Beast-Man being an angry and mindless aggressor, loyal and fearful of Skeletor, and Evil-Lyn having romantic feelings towards Skeletor. Castle Grayskull doesn't look exactly like it was in the show, and Skeletor is a lot more nuanced and threatening than he is in the show. Personally, I don't mind these changes. Sure, it makes the movie barely resemble the show, but there are also interesting changes that make the film unique, three-dimensional, and cool. All in all, solid changes. In conclusion, Masters of the Universe is a dated and enjoyably campy piece of cheese that I can't get enough of. The effects are enjoyably flashy and campy without being Superman 4 levels of awful. The characters are either really good or forgettable but decent, The acting is pretty solid, especially from Dolph Lundgren, Frank Langella, and Billy Barty, and it's just a bucket load of fun. I can certainly understand why some people consider this movie awful. After all, it was made by the 1980s equivalent of The Asylum. But Masters of the Universe is just so enjoyably ridiculous that I can't help but love it. If you're in the mood to scarf on some 80s cheese, pick up a copy of Masters of the Universe and watch the madness unfold. Just an enjoyably silly pile of 1980s awesomeness. That's all for now. Join me next time for my 40th episode, where we will be doing something really special. Here's a hint, it involves this guy. Also in the comments, tell me what adaptation, spin-off, or remake of He-Man is your favorite and why. See you all next time.